for the purposes of this panel, just so you understand, we'd like to define private versus public in a relatively simplistic manner. If the logical cloud entity is accessed only by a single enterprise, then it's a private cloud. I don't care who owns it. I don't care if it sits on a hosting company's infrastructure or if it sits in-house in my infrastructure. But if I'm the only company that accesses it, it's private. If the logical entity is accessed by multiple enterprises or government organizations, then it's public. Now, that raises some interesting connotations, right?
And I would say no.
Right.
I'd say it's nice to get there, but that's to a large extent operational efficiency, operational cost management, etc. And it's pretty important, and don't get me wrong, you don't want to minimize that. But I think you get a lot of the other benefits without necessarily having to go all the way to that level. Right. Yeah, it's desirable, but you have to be pretty clever about the way you build applications. A lot of the legacy applications simply won't fit in there.
I agree with Chris's position on the whole idea of, you know, if you don't have multi-tenancy, then you're not a cloud provider. I think to some extent we listen to the first generation SaaS providers, which you know, are very more vanilla in terms of their delivery model, still having a loud voice. Many of the traditional big mega vendors are coming into the market and giving much more options to clients and saying that you really decide we'll partner with you. And like we saw this morning, it's not going to be either or. It's going to be a hybrid architecture that's delivered. People are measuring business processes as much as the application they're moving.
I think the goal of cloud is dynamic, elastic, resilient, scalable, responsive, and we can begin, I think we'll talk in subsequent parts of the discussion, Charlie, about, you know, there's multiple elements across the cloud. There's the infrastructure layer, the platform layer, the software layer, and as we talked about this morning in the main tent, the business process layer. So, I mean, I think to the extent that you're leveraging technology investments in a dynamic, scalable, high ROI scenario, I don't think it much matters if you're there by yourself or you're there with your neighbors.
I think the multi-tenancy has become a benchmark of, okay, how can I achieve the economy of scale and the economic leverage that I need to perform? And at the highest layer in the stack, if you're looking at business process and business enablement or business function, you could say, hey, look, it's almost like the pyramid. The smaller the core of expertise gets, the higher you get up in that stack. So at the infrastructure layer, if you can create economy of scale because you've patterned out infrastructure and deployed it to 60,000 people, chances are you're pretty darn good at that, and you can drive the economic leverage that you need as a part of your strategy. Whereas if you're doing CRM, and it's up to you to build CRM, implement CRM, support CRM, develop, you know, wrappers around CRM capability internally, there's probably a common denominator of business process and function that you can subscribe to externally and then augment through a business process layer that you can host as a company asset. So I think that's the delineation between these two things, is that it just depends where you're operating and that you don't confuse the benchmark for cloud for the definition of cloud. From an IS leadership perspective, I think that if you take your mess and you decide to extract it and move it somewhere else, what you do is you have a co-hosted mess somewhere else, now with an intolerance for communication across a wide area network at best. Right? There's an onus of the CIO and the IS leadership that we all have to live up to at the same time that capabilities are being developed by large providers, by the mid-tier providers, by the entry folks that are coming into the market. And that is that it's this message of what got us here won't get us there. That there's the legacy IT organization, and you heard this morning, you know, hey, legacy IT is broke. I fully support that. I think it is broke. And I think that in order to succeed and be competitive differentiated in a business function hosted environment, where you've taken business function and architected as such, I think that the 50% of what you see out, and maybe it's not 2 or 3 years, maybe it's 4 years, the 50% of the work that we're all going to do is going to be a different 50% than the work that we do today. So it's not cutting it in half. and running half of what we have today. It's actually revamping the way in which we work as IS leadership. And I think it's taking and building solid contract and vendor management capabilities. It's not all of us doing it part-time. It's hiring the discipline, making sure that the discipline is solid, and executing against an optimized contract portfolio wherever you're getting your services from. And then